Recording in progress. Good. So again, thanks to everyone for your participation. This event is sponsored by the Japan Society of New Orleans. We are the sixth oldest society of production, founded in 1928. And we have had the honor of collaborating with the World War II Museum on a number of different events, mostly revolving around the Japanese-American experience during the war, and particularly with Shane's exhibit. Very much appreciative that you joining us today, Shane, and I'll turn it over to you. And I think you've got a video coming up that we're going to start. I'm sure we'll have some questions from the audience in regards to your exhibit.
Sure. Okay. So, first of all, who's Flora?
Hi, Shane.
Hi, Flora. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much to you and for the Japanese American or the Japan Society of New Orleans. I wish I could have sat with you in person, but I was in New Orleans 2 times, and you know, having seen the museum and having your wonderful food, ate way too much oysters and fried chicken, but had a great time out there. So I take it that you have gone through the exhibit already?
Yes.
Okay, great. Was it everyone's first time seeing it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. So I just like to get a little overview. So did everyone know about internment before the exhibit?
Yes.
But did everyone know about the Japanese American Nisei who fought in World War II?
Yes.
Some didn't. Who did? I'm just curious.
Hey, Shane, this is Mike. If I may make a comment, one of our members, Lawrence Yatsu, was a member of the 442.
Oh.
He is not able to be with us today. He's, obviously age has caught up with him, but he's still living in assisted living right now. But we've had many years, Bobby and Charlotte, a lot of interaction with Larry and Terry Yatsu. So just so that you know, we do have some. There is a connection here in New Orleans with the 442.
Well, that's great. It's always good to have, some living members as well. I had an exhibit at Manzanar, and I did see a lot of people just coming out. They didn't know who I was, but they came out and said they did not know about the Japanese Americans who had fought. And I'm just trying to get a little overview because there's a lot of people across the country that don't know this story. And I appreciate you guys being interested and learning about this a little bit more. I come from a different background where I am Japanese American 3rd generation, Sansei, and my dad's side of the family was born in Maui, and my mom's side of the family was born in Visalia, California. So my dad's side of the family did not have to go to camp, whereas my mom's side did. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But again, I'm very happy that you're here to join me. I'm very happy and proud that the National World War II Museum was able to host the exhibition. I thought they did a great job, and a really nice overview of the story as well as the portraits. I always try and use portraits to tell the story as well as not only just history, because I don't consider myself a historian. I am a photographer. Try to be a storyteller, but history and dates and things like that, I was not very good in high school, and I'm still not very good right now. But I hope that you can bear with me with that. And, I have a lot of interesting stories about the book and how it came about. But right now, I guess we'll do a little overview of my experience, and we'll take a look at the video. I've been working on this project for the past 20 years. It's probably the hardest thing I'll ever do in my life. For me, this project is to help other families to talk like my family never had the chance to. Good. And nice smile again.
If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then Shane Sato's are for words never spoken.
Look at you.
Yep. Look at me. Good. Okay, Shig, you're looking right here. A little more. Good.
For years, he's been taking portraits of World War II veterans from the famous 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the 100th Battalion, and the Military Intelligence Service. Those Japanese-American troops who courageously fought for the same country that had imprisoned many of them and their loved ones. And while most of us have heard their stories, their families have not.
My family, we never spoke very much. We didn't talk. My mom's side, I knew they went to camp. My mom would always say, oh, it's not a big deal. I was young. It didn't bother me too much. My dad would just not really say much. You know, as a kid, I started to believe that. I thought, oh, okay, it wasn't that important. History is not important.
History was lost on Shane. You see, after the war, it was common for the next generation of Asian Americans to assimilate, to blend in at all costs.
Your friends, as they board the bus to leave the center, are going to new experiences and to a better way of living.
I didn't think of myself as Japanese. I just thought of myself as American. I thought that every kid ate Swanson TV dinners and chicken pot pies. I do remember when I was in about the 4th or 5th grade, I was doing a school report on Japan. The teacher said, oh, Japanese, it's too many syllables, so just abbreviate it to Jap. I brought that paper home to my mom, and she looked at it, and she was really mad, and I couldn't figure it out. So I asked her, Mom, why are you so mad? It's just Jap. It's just a very bad word. You should never say that, nor should it ever be taught. And I said, why? What's wrong with Jap? Why can't I say it? Jap, 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 Jap. And she just went ballistic and said, that's what they said. That's what they called us when they took us away to camp. And I remember my focus changed then, and I said, camp? What's camp? How come I didn't get to go to camp? And she said, you don't want to go to camp.
So when an opportunity to photograph these fading heroes arose, Shane took a chance. Over time, he noticed a change in himself. The more pictures he took, the more he understood his family's struggle for acceptance in America. History finally began to weigh on him.
For me, it really strikes a chord because their story and the history is part of my family. To have to prove that they were loyal Americans to a country who actually put them in prison just because they were Japanese. Could I do that? And I have to say, I don't know if I could do that.
What's special about this book is that the pictures are mixed with those unspoken words, those stories and emotions many of the veterans kept just to themselves, until now.
Right there. All right.
Is it on?
Yeah. The Medal of Honor ribbon. You know, for Christ's sake, I haven't seen you in a long time. We're joining the army again, I guess.
For the veterans, this is one last chance to put on their uniforms.
Can't believe that he's gained so much weight and nothing fits.
The fact that Jimmy came, I was super excited because I knew that would be the last time he ever puts on his colonel uniform. And he said he gained weight. He just got out of 10 cancer treatments. So he's eating well, which made me really happy that it didn't fit him.
This one fits. This one does fit, yeah. This is going to be good. Oh, this is his jacket.
Wow, that's great. Once they had the uniforms on, it did change their persona. It did change how they felt.
Put it on. You forgot how heavy they were, didn't you?
It seemed like they were back in that time. They felt that pride, and they definitely had that strength. It showed a different side to them that they don't always show everybody. These are Nisei Japanese men. Luckily, I'm able to somehow draw some of these emotions out. Otherwise, they would all just stand there motionless.
Pull that in through there.
We were up to his room and I said, well, that's a Class B uniform. You can wear that. He says, yeah. I think he was real proud to put it on.
The race against time for them to see the book is definitely now.
Frank Muromatsu, son of Sugoi.
Not long after his book was published, Shane was able to give his book to veterans and their families. The impact was immediate and profound.
Oh, I feel very proud. A little sad too. I miss him a lot.
The picture shows him perfectly. That's Frank.
That's when I used to be.
It was very meaningful, especially these older guys. I consider myself young at 91. It's a good way to preserve history.
I hope that we learn from our mistakes of the past and internment and anything that's close to that never happens again. This happened just 70 years ago. History can repeat itself if we don't continue and remember these stories. Many Nisei fought and died for my future. They went go for broke. And now it's my turn to carry the torch and help the younger generations remember them and keep their spirit alive. So that's a little overview of myself, and the video actually won a Northwest Emmy. So I hope you like the video. I didn't get anything for the Emmy, but the producers did. So you walk through the exhibit. It kind of guided you through a little history of the beginning and the legacy of the 100th 442nd and MIS. I myself wear this Aloha shirt, not because it's hot over here, but basically it's to represent the 100th who came first from Hawaii. A lot of people always think it's the 442nd, which it is, but for myself, my uncles, everyone from Hawaii, they always want to recognize the 100th, and they get on my case all the time for not mentioning it. So this is how I always start off my talks. So a little bit about my family again. My dad and their family were born in Maui. My uncles fought in the 100th. And for my mom's side, the Yasudas, they were born in Visalia, and they had to go to camp, post in Arizona. So during that time, a lot of families did lose their farms, their businesses on the West Coast. If you were on the east side of this exclusion line, which was an imaginary line that kind of went through the West Coast of Seattle, California, Oregon. And those are the people that had to go to camp. But ironically enough, the people that lived in Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor actually happened, they did not have to go to camps. And a lot of the Japanese Americans will always say that's for economic reasons, because a lot of the farms and the fishing businesses on the West Coast were thriving. And a lot of people think that that was an easy way to take those businesses away from them. So I started taking these photos, like Mike said, in 1999. here in Los Angeles, there is a Go for Broke monument here in Little Tokyo. At the monument, these veterans used to sit outside in the hot sun and the rain and wait for people to walk on by and visit the monument, and they would talk about it. That's how I first started meeting some of these veterans. I then started working for the Go for Broke National Education Center, doing their events and fundraisers, things like that. So during that time, I got to learn a little bit more about who they were, because I, as you can see in the video, was pretty ignorant of all that situation. My family never talked to me about any of these things, as well as a lot of veterans. But even on my side, even internment, they did not speak about much of it. So when I started learning about these veterans, I realized, oh my gosh, it's amazing what they had to go through and what they did. So as a photographer back then, I wanted to take pictures of things that inspire me for my own personal work. And so I thought I would start taking some of the pictures. I first started with actually this one behind me right here. That's Tokyo Shihashi. I think his Congressional Gold Medal is the one that you saw in the exhibit. So when I first started taking these photos, I went and I took the photos of them wearing their regular clothes. After I took the photos and I showed it around to different people, they said, oh, that's a nice grandpa photo or senior citizen, you know, who is this? And I realized that's not the reaction I wanted to get. So I remember a lot of my friends were doing reenactments. And so during these reenactments, they would wear the actual uniforms. And so I thought, maybe I'll go ahead and photograph some of them in their uniforms. So this was one of the first tests that I did to photograph them in their uniforms. And going back one step further, when I first started the project, we did another portrait series with the Go for Broke National Education Center. And these are the ones that you see in the black and white. So these black and white photos were shot in film. I'm sure some of you guys remember film. The film was large format, Hasselblad, either 6x6 or Pentax 6x7 portraits, because I wanted to blow these up big. And back then you had to have a large format camera if you want to blow up an image fairly large. The one thing that these guys wanted to do at that time was to wear their Go for Broke outfits, or their uniforms, I guess. And as you can see that they're white. So if there's any photographers there, white is a photographer's nightmare. You do not, everything just shows up white and you can't see anything else. So what I did is I photographed every one of them on a white background. And so then this way, the contrast, you can see their faces and the white shirt blends into the background. So now you're able to see who they were. My specialty then and now is for publicity photography. I worked in a lot of movies, publicity events, movie openings, things like that. And so a lot of times they would give me a very short period of time to photograph the actors and this and that. So I had to think of things really quickly when I got my 2 or 3 minutes to photograph them. Same thing when I photographed these men. A lot of times they did not know what was going on. A lot of them did not want to take their photos. So when I first started, this series was not very easy. A lot of them said no at first, and I had to make a lot of phone calls trying to convince them to take their portraits. So I would go around. I'd travel the country just basically on my vacations. I went to Seattle a lot. I went to Hawaii a lot. And then I would go to the clubhouses and try and take photos of these guys. And so back then there was a decent amount of them. They'd be sitting around, and I would go and ask the different people to try and take their portraits. And most of the time they would say, oh, no, I'm not important. Oh, but that guy over there, he's real important. So I'd go over to that guy and I'd ask him the same thing. And he'd say, oh, no, I'm not important. That guy over there, he's important. So the whole time I'd just be running around in a circle like this and trying to hopefully get a couple guys. I think they were just trying to get rid of me or just trying to laugh at me as I went around in circles the whole time. But I was lucky to get a few people every once in a while. And while I got a few people, the portraits steadily grew. I think in the early 2000s, I probably had the most Nisei soldiers ever photographed. But like I said, after I finished with this series, I wanted to continue on, and that's where you can see that I started taking the photographs in color probably around 2005 and 2006, something like that is when I first started doing these tests. And then I wanted to go ahead and continue this series, taking more of the photographs with them in their uniforms. And as you heard in the video, there was a few guys that still had their uniforms, but very, very few could still fit in them. There was a few that did, but most of them are reproductions. So if you look closely at the portraits, or if any of you have the book, I don't advise you to do this, but if you look closely, you might see folds and cuts and the same uniform over and over again. It was never meant to be authentic. It was just meant to be for photographic impact. So that's why I continued to do this series wearing the uniforms. People then looked at the photos and go, oh, this is a great photo. Were they in the Army? A lot of people, including Japanese Americans like myself, did not know about the 100th 442nd because universally they, like most veterans, never spoke about these things. And so there are only a few people that knew who they were, except in Hawaii, whereas Hawaii, they are very proud. Another thing about Hawaii, my uncles they're all from Hawaii, and they all speak Pidgin English. Have you guys been to Hawaii? Have you heard Pidgin English? Yeah. Can't understand a word that they say. So I remember trying to talk with them, and they would never try. It was very difficult, the communication when we were trying to do these photo shoots. In fact, when I was traveling over there, most of the men over there are, how would you say, they are more outgoing, they're more rambunctious, as opposed to the Japanese Americans here on the West Coast. They were more shy, they tried to fit in and assimilate. Where the Hawaii guys have their own personality, they're more rambunctious, they have this fighting attitude. So that's another thing. When you see these portraits, you can tell, like a lot of the Hawaii guys, they wanted to show off their boxing moves or all these other things that they wanted to show, because a lot of them like to fight and box and stuff like that in Hawaii. That's also where Go for Broke came from. Go for Broke, if you guys don't know, is basically a gambling term. And so when they're playing craps, they'd be like, oh, go for broke, no more money, they down to the last dollar. And so that was their motto when they were fighting, is go for broke. They have nothing left to lose. They had to face prejudice. They had to face all these uphill battles just to even join the Army. And now it's just go for broke. So that is where the motto came from. Do you guys remember seeing the Go for Broke poster in the exhibit? Yeah. So that poster, if you haven't seen the movie, it's actually not a bad movie. Another bit of trivia also with that is back then in I think it's the 50s when they made this movie, they didn't have a bunch of Japanese American actors to be in this movie. So many, if not all, of the Japanese actors are actually 442 members, including the one of the portraits that you saw of the guys. And so most of these guys just kind of played themselves. And they were you know, they're basically, a lot of them were from Hawaii and a little bit more outgoing to do that, whereas the, you know, California or the West Coast guys, they were just a little bit more shy. They spoke English perfectly, you know. And you heard about the Buddha head and Katonk story that was in the, did you guys read about that? So I am a Katonk. Even when I was a little kid and going to Hawaii, they would call me a Katonk. Hey, the Katonk. I'm like, what's a Katonk, right? And so even when, you know, even as a little kid, we were, you know, we were called Katonks. We never knew why we were Katonks until our family kind of told us. But it's amazing to me, that story where the Japanese were in Jerome and Roar, which is fairly close, Arkansas, to you guys, where they actually traveled over there, and they thought, the Hawaii guys thought that Jerome and Roar were little Japanese cities. They didn't realize when they got there that these were internment camps with the machine guns pointing in, and that they had rations, and that they were basically prisoners. And once they realized this, they really joined together with the Katonks or the mainland Japanese to make this fighting unit, because they did not get along. There's a lot of pictures and stories and a lot of fights with these guys as they were trying to become the 442nd. And they were actually going to disband the unit because they thought these guys would never get along, even though they're all Japanese American, but they were completely different in personality and style. So let's start going into some more of the portraits. When I was taking the portraits, I wanted to keep kind of a plain background. I didn't want to have other distractions for the photos. So I remember one time when I was in San Diego, I had 3 of the veterans together. Usually we would try and get as many as we could in a certain area when I traveled, to make the best use of our time. When I got there, I was trying to look for a location, and one of the wives goes, "Oh, I have a pretty rose garden in the back here. Why don't you, you know, take a look at that?" And I looked at it, and it's, you know, I said, "Well, that's great, but maybe I could use your garage." And her garage was full of all this stuff and everything, like a lot of garages. And I said, "Yeah, let's use the garage." And she was like mortified that I actually wanted to take photos in there. But I set up a background, and that's kind of how I use a lot of natural light. I use a lot of single light sources. I try and make it a little bit more contrasty because I wanted to show the emotion of these guys. I try and bring out the personality as much as I can of who they were. Granted, I only meet a lot of them for a few minutes, but I talk to them a little bit. I try and get to know who they are, something about them that I see, whether a lot of times it's their eyes or their hands or their persona, something that I try and catch, and I try and bring that out. So hopefully when you went through the exhibition that you saw some of these personality traits that come out of these guys. And if any of you, well, you have some Japanese Americans over there, I don't know how they were, you know, at that point, but a lot of them were very reserved and don't really show too much emotion. So bringing that out was definitely something that I really wanted to try and do, and hopefully it came through in the portraits for you. So after I finish this first book here, which I think we finished in 2019, that video was shot right around that time. And after the video, or after 2019, I decided, let's try and do another book. because I still had quite a few portraits that was not in the first book. Between the two books, I have 160 portraits of the veterans. And probably I took over 200 pictures. I wasn't able to use all of them, or some we didn't even realize who they were later on because it was so long and the family members or anyone else didn't recognize who these people were. So around 2019, 2018, something like that, I got a grant so I can travel to the East Coast. And so I photographed veterans from the East Coast and the Midwest, places that I was never able to go before, and share some of these stories. Some of these stories are not well known at all because everyone knows about the the West Coast as well as Hawaii. The East Coast stories where they never had to go to camp and they were pretty much part of the community. A lot of people did not know who these guys were. So when I started taking these portraits, I really wanted to, when I started making these books, I should say, because I'm not a historian, I really wanted to share the portraits being the focus. That's why I wanted to make coffee table books. I want people to look at the portraits just like you saw in the gallery, be interested in who these people were, and then learn more about the stories, the history. The internet can share so many of these stories, whereas I, in the books, try and share personal stories, who they were, why did they fight for this country, their stories of internment, things like that. Some things that you cannot find in the history books. So I really wanted to bring out their personality and hopefully have people become interested in sharing their stories about them. I also like to say that I was telling you, a lot of these people did not want their photos taken. So I remember when you can see when I was having this book shown to the people, and that was in Seattle. I was giving out these books to the different veterans who participated. So I went to Hawaii and I was giving out the books to the guys who participated. And I said, you know, here are all your books. And one guy goes, hey, I'm a veteran. How come I'm not in that book? And the lady who set this up for 3 or 4 years with me, she goes, hey, you know, he asked you like 3 times. You always said no. And he goes, well, I didn't know it was going to be any good. So, so that was one of the stories of Hawaii. Now, this book here came out in 2020, and right in time for COVID. So for 2 years, no one really saw this book, but this was part of the East Coast guys and the Midwest people that I photographed. And I have a interesting story about this man right here. His name's Dr. Dick Momey. We were photographing in Colorado, and it was around November. Of course, the church that we were photographing at, the heater breaks down that day. And so we were photographing inside the church, and there's about 10 guys waiting in this different area where I'm photographing over here. And one of the ladies that's helping out runs over to me and goes, Shane, this guy, he's trying to escape. He doesn't want his photo taken. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I run after him. Luckily, he's like 90 something, so I can catch him. And he's saying, you know, why am I here? I don't want my photograph taken. I don't want to wear this uniform. It's cold. I don't want to do this. And I said, sir, let's talk about this. And this is kind of where my publicity background kind of helps out. I had to think of something quick. And so I said, you know, what did you do when you were young? Did you have any hobbies? He goes, well, I was a boxer. And I said, were you good? He goes, yeah, I was really good. And by the way, he was talking just like that. He was really mad. And so I said, well, how about, show me one of your poses there. And so he showed me one of his stances, and I said, I bet you want to hit me. And he goes, yeah, I want to hit you. And so he kind of like gave me a little left hook like this and on the cheek. And after that, he lightened up, loosened up, and basically I was able to do the photo session with him. So I guess my point being is that luckily being able to work with people that don't want their photo taken necessarily, sometimes you get lucky and it becomes the cover of your second book. So this is one of my favorite photos, and you would not imagine that this guy would have if you saw him that day, you would not believe that this is the photo that I got. Oh, and by the way, this photo right here, which is also one of my favorites, I really liked his hands because he had these big, strong hands. His name is Moss Suida, and he was a fisherman. So his hands were just worn and strong and raggedy there. And by the way, he was one of the ones that I photographed in that lady's garage. That was mortified. So that was one of the portraits I took there. But if you have the book, or if you go back to the exhibit, I hope that when you see the portrait, this is really what I want you to see, is his hands and the look on his face. To me, this is one of my favorite and most powerful portraits here. So I have a lot of stories about these guys. There's a lot of history in the books, which the books basically came first. I never really thought about having a gallery exhibition until I got a grant to do the galleries. But now that I have the gallery exhibitions, the books and the galleries seem to go hand in hand. And I hope that, and to me, seeing the portraits this big, like you see back here, really is very powerful. And hopefully it will get people interested in learning more about their stories. Like I said, I have a lot of stories about photographing them. I have a lot of stories about my travels and this and that, but I also really like to share some of the experiences with you. So I'm going to kind of stop right now. Is there any questions that we can go through before I finish? I'd like to maybe hear some stories before we forget about what we already talked about. I love questions. So anyone have some questions right now?
Shane, this is Mike. Did you spend a lot of time in Seattle as far as some of the veterans up there?
Yes, I did. So Seattle, I had a lot of friends in Seattle. And so I would go there probably once a year. And that was one of the main places where I took a lot of the photos in the very beginning. In fact, George Morihiro was one of the ones that introduced me to quite a few of the veterans in the NBS Center up there. And he was the one who enabled me to get more of the veterans. And that's another story that I have to say is, like, when I went there to these different areas, Seattle and Hawaii, I was just a young kid trying to take portraits. They didn't know who I was. Later on in life, the portrait series did become easier because maybe these guys saw their grandkids, or maybe they realized that their own mortality, so they needed to share more of these stories. But also, there was a funny thing is I realized that all these groups have one lady that's kind of in charge, and whatever she says, they will do. So I learned to find whoever this lady was in the different groups and ask them, could you help me get some people? Every time I found out who this lady was, I'd get 10 people who showed up every single time. And that really helped my, enabled me to take more portraits. Whereas me just standing there or sitting there trying to talk to them, that would not work as well. Even in Hawaii, I thought I was smart. I would go during a lot of them were in France and Italy. So they would have wine nights. Okay. Of course, I would go during wine night. After a little bit of wine, maybe they'd be a little more open to take their photos. And sometimes they were. But that's kind of the thing that I really tried to do is every time I went to some place, I would only get 2 or 3 or 4. But as time went on, it became much easier as I was able to take more photos, as well as once I found out who that lady was, I was able to get groups at a time. So I'm amazed at what these ladies were able to accomplish.
I asked that question. If I said the name Dale Watanabe, would you know him? He's the Japan American Society of Washington in Seattle.
Yes, I think he's one of the wasn't he one of the commanders?
Well, he's actually a civilian he's the Japan American Society of Washington, but they do a Japan US military program where they bring in 442 veterans to talk to both young Japanese and American soldiers because there's a joint exercise up there. I didn't know if you happen to go, because I know that there's a large group of the 442 veterans up there. And I'm friends with Dale, so that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, I think Dale's one of the leaders up there. Watanabe is also kind of a common name, but I believe he's definitely one of the leaders up there. The lady that I worked with was Debbie Kashino, who was able to get, I still remember the time when I went there. I thought there'd be like 3 or 4 people, and she didn't tell me that 20 guys would show up. We photographed all day, but that was the most I've ever shot in one time. But
Shane,
yeah, I'm sorry.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
How many 442nds are still alive?
Well, not that many. We're losing them, obviously at a high rate. I know that a couple of the guys, or there's at least 5 that are alive that are in my book, including Yosh Nakamura, who is still active. He still travels and does talks amazingly at 99. And he is just got named community center about him in here in Whittier. But he's an art teacher. There's a lot of stories about these guys, but unfortunately there's only a few remaining that can actually share their stories. Because a lot of them, like you said, their health is deteriorating and they don't travel as much, or we don't hear about them very much. But there's still there's, like I said, in my book that I know of, there's probably about 5 left. I can't think of probably more than 20 or so that I've heard of throughout the country that are around. There's probably a few more, but again, their health and their families not saying anything about it. Either way, there's just a very few left.
How about MIS?
There's a lot more MIS because those guys came a little bit later. But even in the Hawaii in MIS, like for instance, the 100th Club, they said that they would continue the 100th Club until there was the last remaining 100th member. Well, the only 100th member that we know of right now, I think, are all in the States. So there's nobody left in Hawaii at all. But the MIS, there's a few more MIS guys that are still alive. Again, quite a few have been passing away. And, the MIS, a lot of those guys, as you well know, they did not share any of their stories because they were not supposed to. And, a lot of them passed away with their stories still inside. So the MIS stories that you see in the books, and a lot of their stories that you see, in the programs and other history are very important because, you know, they were supposed to be secret. And just talking about that, I have an exhibition at the Presidio in San Francisco here, up north. And their training center was just this little tiny hidden building called, they called it Building 640. And that's where my exhibition is right now. And that's where these guys trained in secret there at the Presidio. And it's ironically right underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, probably only about 200 yards away.
Reason I asked that, my dad was an MIS.
Oh, who are you again? I can't. Can I see you?
Sir? Can't see you.
Yeah, stand up, Lane.
Oh, hi. What's your name?
My last name is Johnny Duro.
Yanahiro. Okay.
My two uncles were 442nd, but my dad was older than they, was an MIS and volunteered before the war. But to try to find any history of the MIS, it's not available. I've had very extensive work done to see if you could find where they went after they were taken out of Fort Ord after 9066 occurred, and you can't find what happened. I didn't know.
And sorry, your audio is a little bit choppy, but you have read The Nisei Linguist by Dr. James McNaughton?
Yes.
So there's more and more books about the MIS, but yes, you're right. It was a very secret society, and you know, a lot of these guys. There's a story of General Bramlett, who did one of the forward in my second book here, and this is a 4-star general, and he was asking one of the MISers about one of his missions, and you know, he was saying something to the effect like, "Oh, you know, it's been a long time. You can talk about it now." And the guy goes, "No, sir, I cannot," and hung up on the general.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you talk to any veterans who expressed being like further disillusioned by the American government after their time in service? Or did most of them leave it feeling more patriotic?
I think for the most part, the ones who volunteered for my book always felt more patriotic. I personally never heard any negative thing about the government, including the people who went to the internment camps. I'm sure the feeling for the guys from Hawaii were, as I said, was much different, more patriotic than the guys who had to try and fight with their families that were put in prison. But even my mom, she never said anything bad about the government, even when I had no idea what camp was, like you saw in the video. But a lot of these guys, again, if you see it in the book or if you saw some of the quotes that were in the video, they really want to show their loyalty. They really want to be patriotic. The ones I interviewed and talked to, the main reason they wanted to fight is because they felt that they were Americans. They felt they had to prove something, not only for themselves, but for their families. A lot of, you know, and this was also not always the case. There are a lot of men who didn't want to fight because they said, well, if you let my family out of prison, I will gladly fight. And a lot of them did not, because they said, how can I fight if, you know, you're putting my family in prisons? Why should I fight? And so a lot of those guys, you know, they went to jail because of that. But there was a lot of most of the veterans, obviously the ones who fought, were in my book, and those ones there always felt they had something to prove, and that was a universal theme with all the photographs that I took.
Figure that out.
they're fighting for their identity, like to prove that they were American, like themselves.
Sorry, very choppy. Can you talk into the mic?
So would you say that they're fighting for their own identity, like to prove to themselves that they were American? Not just for the country, but for themselves?
Yes, I absolutely think so. All of them felt very proud, very patriotic, and that's one of the things that I want to show in the portraits. They were stoic, they were strong, they were quiet, but they definitely wanted to prove and to show who they were. Because at that point, I can't imagine how they would feel. I don't know if anyone could imagine how they felt at that point, having everything taken away from them, being put into a camp. My family was in Poston, and I'm a Poston board member, so I go out to Poston, Arizona, and see these camps. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the camps, but they're always in these desolate areas. A lot of them are Indian lands, and it's just a dust bowl out there. A lot of the irrigation, a lot of the things that you see out there were built by the Japanese, and it's hard to imagine trying to live in those kind of conditions and then wanting to go and volunteer. But again, like you were saying, they really want to prove their identity. They really want to prove their loyalty, not only for themselves, but also for their families. And the guys from Hawaii, they just really want to show that they're American citizens. And that's again kind of a universal experience that when I photographed all over the country.
I read that one of the people you photographed owned an avocado farm that got taken away from him. Was any of that given back to any of them after the war?
So a lot of these personal stories, everyone's a little bit different. Like for instance, my family, they were taken away, and so we had tomatoes and olives and oranges, and we're lucky that our neighbor took care of it. I don't know exactly what the negotiations were, but when they came back, they were able to get everything back. I think the machinery was gone, the house was pretty much ransacked, but they were able to return to something. Unfortunately, that was not the case with a lot of these different people. Their businesses were taken away. They did not come back to anything. The boats, there's a lot of stories where they had people would try and buy their personal belongings pennies to the dollar because they know they weren't going to be coming back anytime soon. Sad things where they couldn't bring their pets. So they just had to, let the family dog run loose or give it to someone else. There's a lot of, unfortunate stories that you hear. And I don't share a lot of those, in the book, but there's a lot of these stories where when they returned, they did lose everything. They had to start from scratch. And yet they were, I guess, very happy to have fought for the country, to happen to prove their loyalty and still be able to come back and be American citizens. I think that was like one of their main points to do that. But I'm sure and I know there are a lot of other people that didn't feel that same sentiment. They were very bitter, and maybe they didn't show it as much, but they were, everyone's situation was a little bit different. I remember one of the men that my dad's was friends with came from Terminal Island. Terminal Island was this fishing community that's right off LA Harbor here in California, where I used to go fishing all the time. And you wouldn't even know it's an island. It's kind of this tiny little thing that's off the coast. And they came in, and basically the Army said they had overnight to pack their things. And so when they left, they lost pretty much everything because they could only take what they could carry. Their fishing boats, their homes, their personal belongings, a lot of it was gone. And so hardly any of them returned back to those areas because they really had nothing left to go back to.
Many of those people, you still had to pay property tax. And so,
You know,
right, Mike, you had to pay property tax. So if you didn't have an income, which nobody did, they just sold it at the courthouse steps and the neighbors bought it. So nobody had anything left because you couldn't pay the property tax if you own the land.
yeah, so I guess that was probably with my family's case that someone took care of the land. So when they came back, they had something to start anew with. Yeah, that was my two sides of the family have, much different stories. By the way, has any of you been to one of the internment camps? Any of the sites? Yeah, where did you go?
I've been to Manzanar.
Manzanar, okay. So Manzanar is here in California, and I had an exhibition there, and I drive by there at least a couple times a year because I go fishing in Mammoth. So on our way up and down, we'll stop by and take a look. But that's one of the actual I wouldn't say nicer camps, but it's more developed where they have some barracks. They have like a basketball court, or baseball field. Minidoka is also very well developed, as well as Heart Mountain. But some of the other ones, it's just a plaque or something like that, and there's really not much there. Hopefully, even at Poston, where we are, we're trying to get an interpretive center and things like that. And but obviously, it's going to take a long time and money before those things come to fruition.
We probably have time for one more question. Do we have any more questions from the floor, Flora?
Shane, this is Flora again. Thank you so much. I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you. My question is, you had some photos that you said you didn't use. Are you going to have a third book?
No, I don't think I'm going to have a third book. Right now, I have my whole living room here full of the first and the second book, and my wife wants me to get rid of them as quickly as possible. So, yeah, right now, even the third book, I'm sorry, a third book, we have enough, maybe 40 or 50 more portraits, but yeah, I think the two books kind of go well hand in hand, and it also kind of ends here with the signing of the Missouri, so it kind of finalizes right there. But if you haven't seen the books, I think they're available in the bookstore there, as well as online. If you look at the gopherbrokespirit.com or look up my name, you can take a look at those. I'd happy to sign any of them if you just let me know. But they're really, like I said, they're meant to be coffee table books, to be shown, not just read in terms of the history, but to bring out some of the people and the personality of who they were. Because when I was growing up, these stories, and as well as a lot of sanseis my age, like hardly any of us speak Japanese. I can't speak Japanese except for food, things like that. But a lot of these stories no one really knew about because they universally did not talk about internment as well as the war, like many veterans. But through the books, I hope that people will try and remember who these guys were and share their stories. And I'm glad that people like yourselves are interested. Please follow me on some of my social media. I would appreciate that. helps me to travel the exhibit and have more people like you look at it. I think it's the only exhibition that features portraits of these Nisei veterans. Even at the World War II Museum, I think they said that I'm one of the few living photographers that are part of the exhibition, because a lot of these are all historical photographs that you see. There's not too many recent photographs of that they feature, such as this. And to me, that's a very big honor, as well as having an honor to have something at the World War II Museum, because it's such a prestigious institution. And so many people like yourselves go through it. It's fantastic. I appreciate that all you guys are there. And if you ever have any questions, or if you want to learn more about where I'm going, please follow me. It will tell you next time if I happen to be in New Orleans, or if we're going out somewhere else across the country to with the gallery, or we are traveling with a show with called Defining Courage, and that is a kind of interactive show with some of the veterans, as well as a newscaster here on the West Coast named David Ono. Kind of does a talk, as well as sees a video presentation, singing. It's kind of hard to explain, but my portraits are part of that show as well.
Well, Shane, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And another pitch, I believe that your books are available over in the bookstore that's just to the, as you leave the restaurant to the right. So I certainly encourage people to stop by and take a look. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
It's a great exhibition too. Really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to fit it in before it turned over. So best of luck to you. And if you are in New Orleans, please look us up. Next time you come in, give us a heads up. We'll make sure to follow you, so we'll know.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Flora, as well, for putting this all together.
Where is this going to be next?
Right now, it's at the Presidio in San Francisco, and it is going to go to Heart Mountain, Wyoming. It just finished at Boise State, so it actually has traveled from Washington, D.C. all the way to Maui. So it's been technically across the country, but there's a lot of places and people who haven't seen it, and please spread the word. So hopefully we can get the exhibitions as well as the books going, and so more people can see this. Thank you very much.
Good deal. Thank you so much, Shane.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye, guys. Have a nice afternoon.
You too.